From exploring the seas as a pirate queen to now looking over at a different kind of queen that apparently helped England escape from the perils of war. That is right, we're back with unique history today, everyone. This is the Mythical Dragon, and I'm excited to learn more about this particular queen, as Matilda, this is her name, which is also a movie that I really enjoyed, but Matilda is actually William the Conqueror's queen. So a little historical context before we dive into her story and how her influence was apparently pretty important to the Norman the Norman control of England. So, Battle of Hastings, 1066, pretty infamous war if you are a history buff like I am. That is when William and Harold went to war. So, William of Normandy, who's actually was related to Harold in some form or another. I mean, most of the royals and leaders at that time were related to each other in some form or another. But they went to war against each other. And long story short, Battle of Hastings happens, Stamford Bridge. There was a battle there. William defeated Harold and took over. And that's where we had a lot of French influence, actually, on the English language. I think I talked about this before, where we got the French word castle into our English language, and a few others that are quite unique, like beautiful, by the way. That was not a typical quote-unquote English word. Mind you, not a lot of English words are typical English words, because it's a very mixed mash of a language upon a language on a language. But we had a lot of French influence during this period. So William here, this is what we're going to be talking about today. His control and takeover of England. And in particular, though, we're not going to look at him and his history. We're going to be focusing on his wife, Matilda, who is the queen. So again, I found this article online. I've subscribed to this really cool History Extra website that I'll put below in the description for you. But it's really interesting. I've kind of gotten a little bit of tips and pieces of her story, and she seems like another remarkable lady, so I can't wait to share another unique history with you guys today. So let's begin with the introduction here. That England wasn't entirely consumed by violence in the years following the Norman conquest is a tribute to the diplomatic skills of William I's wife, Matilda. The author here, Tracy Boardman, hails a woman who inspired a new model of queenship. Basically saying there that, of course, the English would resist the Norman control. They would not want to have this. I mean, the history of England and France going against each other is as old as time, and no difference here. But it was with her apparently diplomatic skills that actually prevented a lot of conflict, basically, for England and for the Norman soldiers that came over. So we get to discover and learn how. So let's begin here. In late autumn 1066, a diminutive woman of 35 prayed fervently in the Benedictine Priory of Notre Dame de Pré, a small chapel that she had founded in 1060 on the banks of the river Seine near Rouen. Flanked by her ladies, she had spent many hours at her devotions during the previous few days. Okay, so she's a religious lady, helped found a chapel, actually, which is remarkable, and apparently needed to do a lot of praying in this few days. Interesting start. Let's see here. It was with good cause that she had kept such an anxious vigil. Her husband, William the Bastard, Dork of Normandy, had set sail for England more than 2 weeks before, determined to wrest the throne from Harold Godwinson. At last, a messenger arrived with news that her prayers had been answered. William and his Norman army had triumphed over the Saxons at Senlac Hill, close to the town of Hastings, by which the battle would henceforth be known. She, Matilda, was now not just Duchess of Normandy, but Queen of England. Yeah. Damn. What a way to gain a title I suppose, or an additional title to what she already has. Crazy. Upon hearing the momentous tidings, Matilda joyfully proclaimed that the priory should henceforth be known as Notre Dame de Bonne News, Our Lady of Good News. I'm really bad with French, I apologize. But yeah, Notre Dame de Bonne News, Our Lady of Good News. She had good reason to rejoice. The crown of England was a glittering prize that even she, with her overweening ambition, could not possibly have hoped for when she had become the wife of the base-born Duke of Normandy some 15 years earlier. Wait, she married him when she was 20. Dang, that's pretty ambitious for a young lady. Dang. But Hastings, decisive as it was, marked the start, not the end, of William's campaign to conquer England. It would take years of bitter fighting before he was finally able to establish a measure of control over the country. William himself realized that he could not rule by the sword alone. He needed to win the hearts and minds of his resentful new subjects. The surest means of achieving this was to place his wife at center stage. Yeah. It's a pretty typical tactic now that I think about it. When it comes to history is, well, I just killed a lot of their people as the king and as a fighter and a warrior. They're not going to like that. I am legit a murderer. Who hasn't done these evil things before that would be able to calm them? And what more better to calm a crowd of angry people than the voice of a woman, apparently? So, it's very typical. I'm reading it out. It's a little sarcastic there for you guys, but it's a strategy, and he employed it well, apparently. So, let's see here. Matilda had already won great renown within Normandy for her piety, political shrewdness, and, above all, her unimpeachable lineage, daughter of the formidable Count Baldwin V of Flanders, and niece of the King of France. Wow. That's quite a descent, like a descendant's line there. Wow. It continues, actually. I just read a little bit more here. Woof. She could trace her descent from the great Charlemagne, founding father of the French and German empires. So this is 1066. So this history goes, her history and her lineage, her family life, her genealogy is what I'm trying to say here, led to all of these formidable men in power. And it derived from this Charlemagne who helped with the French and German empires, or like what we would know as the French and German empires today. Crazy. So she definitely has been tied into politics her entire life, just because of who she was born to. Interesting. Makes you wonder if she wanted it, but if she used these skills well and got to where she is before even being queen, obviously she wanted it. There's that drive that she had. So when her husband calls upon her, I'm sure she'd answer. There'd be that interest to see if she can win over the English. If her family before her won over the German and the French, it would be kind of a neat little step forward for her family and her lineage to be able to win over the English. Let's see if she does that. So even more valuable from her husband's perspective was the fact that she had English royal blood in her veins, for she was descended from King Alfred the Great. Really came from a patriarchal line of power, if you think about that. King Alfred the Great. Whoa. So she... Dang, that's a complicated family history. Makes you want to like look at a family tree for her and see like where all these connections actually lined up and how they lined up. Because English, German, French, all within her. Wow, okay. I'm amazed that she has this like DNA in her, at least, to be charismatic, potentially, to borrow from last week's episode, charismatic. It's a little wonder that William had been so desperate to marry her. Really? He was so desperate to marry her? It's sad that he's doing it for power, but it's kind of cute at the same time. Desperate to marry her that, according to one account, he had ridden at full speed to Bruges and dragged her by the hair into the mud, kicking and beating her until she agreed to become his wife. That took a turn. Cute, sweet, desperate men chasing after a woman's affection as he should. But then it got abusive, and now I'm not okay with it. No. You do not grab a woman by the hair, beat her, throw her in the mud, and then make her your wife. That's awful. That's not okay. Oof. Yeah. Oh, I'm not liking that one. That didn't sit well with me. But despite its rather inauspicious beginnings, to put it lightly, William and Matilda's marriage would prove one of the most successful in history. Huh. I didn't think that would be possible with that beginning, but I guess, it tells an interesting story that would be really good to share at parties, I suppose. But maybe leave out the kicking and beating part out. Potentially. Anyway, together, they established the mighty Norman dynasty, which would dominate Europe for more than 100 years. In an age when the primary duty of female consorts was to produce an heir, Matilda exceeded expectations by giving birth to 4 sons and at least 5 daughters, all of whom survived well into adulthood. That's remarkable for that time period. Again, think about this. This is the 1000s. This is the 11th century in Europe. To have all 9 kids of hers make it and survive all the illness, the lack of modern technology we have today, and survive into adulthood is a remarkable feat. So well done, William and Matilda. You kept your children alive in a world where that was not always possible. I give them props for that. That's crazy. Thinking back to 1000s, 900s, that kind of time period. Damn. Well done. Well done. She may have been the model of wifely obedience on the surface, but this masked a fierce ambition for power. There it is. There's the feminist I knew she would be. Yes. Go Matilda. And Matilda combined the unrelenting duties of motherhood with an increasingly active role in the governments of Normandy. By 1066, she had gained unrivaled influence over her husband, and he had no hesitation in appointing her regent of the duchy when he embarked upon the invasion of England. Okay. I'm pausing for a second there, because that means there's trust. It wasn't very often in, the royal lineage, the aristocracy of Europe, that the king would trust his wife, or the wife would trust the king, even. There's usually distrust in most marriages, because most of the time, these people would get married for power. That's it. But here, with her passion, her drive to get more power, and obviously succeeding with it, he actually trusted her completely. Be like, you know what? You are my regent. You are my queen of the Duchy of Normandy. I will leave it in your hands while I go and try to invade England. That's a whole interesting, remarkable level of trust. Even if it was just a political move, that's still a really strong trust between the two. Yeah, wow. So, continuing forward, within weeks of his victory at Hastings, William was sorely missing his wife's presence. Aww. Well, wait, let's not go aw yet, because last time I did that, he ended up being a jerk. So, I'm taking back my aw. So he resolved to defer his coronation, which was scheduled for Christmas Day, 1066, so that Matilda might join him, since, if God granted him this honor, he wished for his wife to be crowned with him. This was more than mere devotion. He knew full well that Matilda's presence, given her ancestral ties with previous English kings, would lend the occasion much-needed legitimacy. But his advisors urged that he could brook no delay and his coronation went ahead before Matilda was able to leave Normandy. That's unfortunate. There's a really sweet sentiment there, even if it was a political move in the end. Sweet sentiments, wanted to be crowned with his wife. Makes sense, especially if the marriage was healthy and relatively good, despite the starts. Makes sense. So that's unfortunate that his advisors were like, no, get this done now. We need to make sure we assert your power over the country, and we cannot wait for your wife any longer, and made him do it without her. That's crappy. That's shitty. Hello, downtown traffic. My apologies. Matilda was every bit as eager as William to establish herself in England, and had already begun to style herself queen. But it was not until the spring of 1068 that she finally arrived in her new kingdom. So 2-year delay there, because, well, I guess towards the end of 1066 is when that happened, so a year and a half maybe, or more, who knows, but that is a long delay for her to come and join her husband. That's 2 years without him. That's rough. That's pretty hard for the marriage. But the delay had been caused not just by the demands of her regency in Normandy, but also her role as matriarch of the Norman dynasty. She had fallen pregnant shortly before William's departure for England in 1066, resulting in the birth of a daughter, Adela. Oh, I like that name. And by the time she landed on English soil, she was pregnant once more. So maybe William was able to go back and forth, because unless she cheated, then that's a whole other story, but wow, that's 2 babies in 2 years. Oh boy. Goodness. So she arrives here in 1068, and the new queen's arrival in England was noted by the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, which referred to her derisively as the Lady Matilda, while her new subjects called her the Strange Woman. Their suspicion was rooted in the fact that she was spoken for as La Royne by the Normans, which implied that she was a female sovereign in her own right. This was shocking to her new subjects. Previous English queens had been referred to merely as the king's wife. Yeah, that alludes to a little bit of what I was talking about before, where the queens or the wives of all these kings would just be the king's wife. Not a lot of power, just sort of there to support the husbands and be a public figure, nothing else. So the English are like, oh, wait a minute. This strange woman is coming to join our new king, and she has a level of power and regency? What is this? This is very foreign, very strange. Why is this happening? Like, they would absolutely question it. So I'm seeing a lot of doubt so far, not a lot of winning over as they're hoping for. Just lots of doubt. Spectacle, expectation, suspicion. Nothing of her actually winning the people over yet. But let's see if she does with the next section here. Opulent spectacle. Undeterred, Matilda threw herself into the task of bringing much-needed glamour to her husband's court. A magnificent gathering was held at Winchester to celebrate Easter, and another at Westminster shortly afterwards, attended by a host of English notables. Even the anti-Norman chroniclers could not help but be impressed by the opulent spectacle that the couple presented, clad from head to toe in gold-encrusted robes, and eating their sumptuous meals from gold and silver platters. One way to win over the people. Look how wealthy we are. Look at all of our power and our wealth, and look how much food we are eating, because food in this time period wasn't seen as a bad thing as it is nowadays. It's seen as oh, look at them. They can eat a 9-course meal and on these beautiful golden plates. There's something special about them. That's pretty much the judgments of people back then. Interesting. So as soon as these celebrations were out of the way, plans began in earnest for the main purpose of Matilda's visit, her coronation. The event was loaded with significance. Besides being vital to William's efforts to reinforce his legitimacy in the eyes of his new subjects, Matilda would be the first Queen of England to be formally styled Regina. So referred as Regina. I'll say Regina. I know there's this town in Canada called Regina, so I'll go Regina for this one. Her coronation was also the first ever staged just for a queen, and Matilda was determined that it should eclipse her husband's in splendor and magnificence. Every detail was planned with meticulous care. Special lauds, so these are ritual chants, songs basically, so special lauds were written for the occasion, declaring that Matilda shared William's authority. Never before had a queen's power been so formalized, or so equal to that of the king. It was a sign of things to come. Ooh, I like how ominous that sounds. A sign of things to come. It sounds very Macbeth witch suspicion-like a little bit there. I love it. So, so representation of this coronation was for I'm equal in power and strength to my husband. And you all have to accept that. Everyone here in England has to accept that. That's how it is. Here we go. And here we go. The new queen's presence did not immediately establish order in England. Barely were the coronation celebrations out of the way, then fresh trouble had broken out in the north of the kingdom. Fearing a rebellion, William hastened to York, the principal city of the north, from where he could prepare his own forces to quell any uprisings. Matilda had no intention of staying behind in the relatively safe confines of the court in London. Sensing an opportunity to win over their recalcitrant subjects, she decided to join her husband in Yorkshire. This involved a journey of some 200 miles on roads that were little more than mud tracks, a considerable enough feat in itself, let alone for a woman who was by then heavily pregnant. Foremost in her mind was the thought that if she could give birth to this new heir in the most rebellious region of her kingdom, it would achieve more towards Anglo-Norman integration than her husband's strong-arm tactics ever could. I guess that makes sense. I mean, like, look at me, I risked my health, my life, my pregnancy, going down these roads that really were not roads. I made it here in Yorkshire, and I gave birth to hopefully a son. That's what they would be hoping for, right? For this time period. And if she could give them a son, it should help kind of keep things under control and then celebrated, probably. I think that's kind of what the intention there was. So although she was bound for York, the onset of labor forced Matilda to take refuge in Selby, some 14 miles south of the northern capital. Oh, that's unfortunate. She was 14 miles away from being in York. There, she gave birth to Henry, her 9th and final child. So she didn't quite make it. I wonder if that still had an effect, or if she was able to win them over anyway. We'll see. Oh, I should have read the next paragraph. Her plan worked brilliantly. The English came to regard this prince as the only lawful successor to their throne from among the Norman dynasty, even though he had 3 elder brothers. Matilda encouraged this view by making Henry heir to all of her lands in England. She also named him after her uncle, the King of France, to strengthen his legitimacy. Fair enough. That's a really good sign of bringing both sides together. Here he will have rule of all of my lands here in England, because again, land is key to nobility and to ownership and to rulership, monarchy basically. And then named him Henry after the King of France, to just show both sides that I am loyal to the English. Here's how I show that. And then I'm also loyal to the French and Normandy by naming him this name. So it's an interesting consensus, basically, or compromise to what she was doing there. So, yeah, to strengthen his legitimacy. Very cool. Matilda, though, returned to Normandy shortly after Henry's birth in order to take up the reins of government once more. But when a fresh uprising broke out in the north of England in 1069, William urged her return. "Dear wifey of mine, please come back. The north still hate me. Help!" That's probably, maybe, low-key what he was like. That's funny. While he dealt with the rebels in York and the surrounding area, a strong presence was required to guard against any sympathetic uprisings in the south of the kingdom. Matilda, already gaining favor among the English people, thanks to her dignified bearing and gentle demeanor, formed a welcome contrast to her husband's brutality. She was therefore ideally suited for this task, to stay in the south while William dealt with the north. Fair enough. But I like how they phrased that. She was gentle demeanor and dignified bearing. Her bloodline, basically, and being connected to the English roots. During the next 12 years, wow, that's a long time. But during the next 12 years, Matilda constantly flitted between England and Normandy, bolstering her husband's rule in both countries and becoming an ever more powerful figurehead for the Norman regime. In England, she was particularly active in the sphere of justice. There are numerous references in Domesday Book to her hearing English legal cases during William's absences, which became increasingly frequent during the 1070s. The impressive variety of English charters in which Matilda was involved attest to her versatility in business matters. Yeah, showed that she was really educated, could pick up the English system really well, and wanted to prove that she could still serve her country, or serve this country to prove her loyalty. So she learned how things worked, how things were ran, and spearheaded it, kept going and working with it. So it's a remarkable strategy, like really well done, really well thought out. The Queen was also at the heart of some of the most important religious debates of the reign, notably when she and her husband ordered that the primacy of York should be subject to the authority of the Archbishop of Canterbury, a symbolic ruling which effectively brought the North under the control of the court in London. Oh, interesting, okay. Ever sensitive to the mood of the English people, though, she subsequently made a series of generous bequests to the church. In so doing, she won praise from the chroniclers, who described her as munificent and liberal of her gifts, and indefatigable? I guess meaning like not able to be exhausted or be exhausting. So indefatigable at alleviating distress in every shape. Okay. Breaking down that last paragraph there. Made some sort of religious connection, alliance with the people in York and Canterbury, really bridging the gap between York being on its own and being connected to London and England altogether. Basically unifying this region, like the north of England to the south, through this alliance of some sorts with the Archbishop, and made them all unified and connected and brought together. And so these chroniclers, the people that were writing about her or talking about her, discussing about Matilda, basically said that she was amazing. She worked really, really hard to alleviate distress, alleviate conflict throughout the region by doing these kinds of things, making deals and alliances and appointing people here, appointing people there, and unifying the country for her husband, basically. And, well, I mean for herself, because she had equal power, as was stated. Now, this next part of the article doesn't sound very positive, though. The Spoils of Conquest. Matilda's liberality set her apart from the other members of the Norman ruling elite, who had shared in the spoils of the conquest. And, whereas her husband and his Norman entourage relied upon interpreters, she made the effort to master the English language, a fact that greatly endeared her to the native population. Yeah. To take the time to learn a language that you did not know in order to bridge the gap between two cultures is a noble feat. Especially if you're traveling to another country. Like, let's say you know that you're planning on going on a trip to France, maybe in the next 3 years. That's a goal of yours. And you refuse to learn the language, though. You're like, I'm sure there'll be interpreters and people who speak English there. I'm just gonna run with it. It'll be fine. Then you get there and you realize, oh, nope, I need interpreters. I need people to help me with this. It's not a good tactic. It's not a good strategy. I'm not saying you have to learn the entire language for your trip, but maybe the key phrases like hi, how are you? My name is Liz. This is where I'm from. And asking directions and ordering basic food might be just some general, common phrases to learn would be a benefit. And the locals are usually really appreciative that you took the time to study and learn a little bit of their language with them. So there's that great appreciation for Matilda for taking the time to learn this language. So, as well as winning popularity in her own right, Matilda also gradually succeeded in persuading her husband to adopt a more conciliatory. That's a really awkward word. Conciliatory stance towards his conquered subjects. What do you mean by conciliatory? I guess we'll find out. Sorry, that word is bugging me. I don't really like it in that sentence. It doesn't quite work there. I guess more of a concise or... That's bugging me. The grammar in the English there is bugging me a little bit. Anyway. King William, by the advice of Matilda, treated the English kindly as long as she lived. Observed one contemporary. Oh. So conciliatory, so meaning in a much more kinder, nicer, welcoming, friendlier way. He must have treated them poorly because he conquered them. So he's like, ha ha ha, I'm superior. But I suppose with that statement there, by the advice of Matilda, treated the English kindly as long as she lived. So he ended up shifting his attitude, being like, ha ha ha, I'm superior, to, I'm superior, but I want to get to know you, or I want to respect you, instead of not having respect for them. Okay. That clarified that. I don't know why that word bugged me. Apologies, everyone. We've got this. Moving on. When Edward the Confessor's widow, Edith, who had long been a figurehead for the Saxon regime, died in 1075, Matilda urged William to arrange for her remains to be conveyed from Winchester to Westminster with great honor, so that she might be interred in the abbey next to her husband. There, a tomb lavishly decorated with gold and silver was erected, and William also paid for a suitably ostentatious funeral. Nice. So, they didn't have to do that. Matilda and William, these Norman rulers, these foreign rulers that conquered England, did not have to pay homage to this previous figurehead of English power, basically. They didn't have to do that. They could have been, oh, sorry for your loss, carry on, back to business as normal. But instead, Matilda was like, no, we need to do something for this. The people are hurting. She was maybe not respected or well respected, who knows, we don't really know the context, but she was in power here. Our people are hurting. We need to do something respectful for this. And then that's what they did. That probably would have helped, really helped secure their place as rulers of England and that place, showing that kind of empathy and things. Even if it was a power move, even if it was a strategy to keep winning the English people over, it was still like the nicest thing to do. So by the time of her last sojourn in England in 1081, Matilda had earned widespread admiration among the people. A consummate diplomat, she had steadily and patiently overcome their initial suspicion with a brilliantly executed public relations campaign. Whereas in the early days of her reign, she had been dismissed as William's jabid, bedfellow. Oh, that's... yikes. You're just your husband's lover. Your husband's sexual pleasure, basically. That's how they viewed her in the beginning. But now she was known as the Queen of the English, Matilda, wealthy and powerful. Even the most misogynistic of the chroniclers claimed that the common people, the rich, every gender and age, the whole clergy, every tongue, every class, admired her just and prudent character. So even the ones that still doubted her, still critiqued her, still didn't quite believe in her, still saw her as that every part of England thought that she was just and prudent, which is remarkable. She really won them over in the end. Matilda's natural shrewdness and diplomacy had done at least as much, if not more, to secure England for the Normans than her conqueror husband's military campaigns ever could. So yeah, it's thinking about their dynamic, the power dynamic between William and Matilda. William, superb fighter, warrior, strategist, king, like really taking that military might. He had that. He was really good at that. But then he had his counterpart Matilda, who could take care of the rest, the diplomacy, the politeness, the respect for the people they conquered. She genuinely had that, and it balanced them out quite well. That won them over in the end, saying, wow, we've got a king who will protect us because he's powerful, he's mighty, he's impressive, and he's got this wife who will do anything for us as people. So just having those two figureheads like that in the end won them over. And now we get to the part where we read about Matilda and her death. So that's taking it down a couple of pages, matching the tone of the article segment titled Mourning Matilda. Matilda's death in November 1083 was deeply mourned on both sides of the Channel. As one contemporary observed, she would be wept for by the English and the Normans for many years. Principal among them was her husband, who fell into a deep depression from which he never recovered. Oh, okay. There was genuine love there right till the end. Okay, William. That almost made me emotional. Damn, he never recovered from her death. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, William. He had good reason to mourn her loss. Matilda had proved the mainstay of William's rule in England, and without her he was continually forced to struggle against the storms of troubles that rose up against him. Her career marked the dawning of a new era for royal consorts. By wielding immense power in both Normandy and England, not just on behalf of her husband, but at times in direct opposition to him, Matilda confounded the traditional views of women in medieval society and provided an inspiring new model of queenship. No longer confined to the domestic sphere, giving birth to sons and having heirs, her successors were able to play an active part in the political, judicial, and spiritual life of their kingdoms for centuries to come. Yeah, that's remarkable. I don't know why that got me, where he, that just one sentence there was, her husband, who fell into a deeper depression from which he never recovered. Yeah, I didn't expect that. So, there's a timeline here that I can quickly go through. Do I have enough time? Yeah, why not? We're 40 minutes in, might as well keep going. So again, these years are roughly, so there's the circa, that phrase is roughly about this time. So 1031, Matilda is born to Count Baldwin V of Flanders and his wife Adela of France. She named one of her daughters after her mama. Matilda named one of her daughters after her mama. That's really sweet. She immediately becomes a highly prized pawn in the international marriage market because of the Count and the relationship with Adela. In 1051, wedding of Matilda and William takes place at Eu, on the border between Normandy and Flanders, in defiance of a papal ban on the grounds of consanguinity. So I guess they got married and it pissed off some people. That's kind of what I got from that sentence there. They married in defiance to some sort of weird rule that was there during that time period. 1059, so 8 years after they had been married, work begins on Matilda's magnificent abbey of La Trinité in Caen, built as a penance after Pope Nicholas II formally lifts the interdict on her marriage. Hey! So 8 years of rebellion. Those two got married and it was against the law. She decided to work on building this abbey, this La Trinité in Caen, and built it basically as a penance to help lift this weird ruling or judgments on her marriage, basically. Crazy. So 1066, the Norman Conquest. Matilda's husband triumphs at Hastings and she immediately begins styling herself Queen of England. She inherits substantial landed wealth in her new kingdom. So land, wealth, money, power. She gains substantial amount of that, basically, in 1066. 1068, Matilda is crowned at Westminster Abbey and becomes the first consort to be formally recognized as queen in her own right. She gives birth to her fourth son, Henry, shortly afterwards. 1075, death of Edith, the widow of Edward the Confessor, a powerful figurehead for the Saxon regime, leads to the full acceptance of Matilda as queen in England for her actions in providing a funeral for her. Very fair. Very, very fair. 1077, rebellion led by Robert Curthose, William and Matilda's eldest son. Oh! Matilda secretly sends money to support him. William furiously denounces her as a faithless wife. Oh no. Yikes. So, his own son rebelled against him. And then his wife, Matilda, was like, go for it, Robert, you got this, I believe in you. Your dad's doing stuff that I don't agree with, here you go, gives money. And then William gets angry and denounces her as a faithless wife. Oof, down comes the reputation for Matilda a little bit there. Yikes. And then 1083, as we just read, Matilda dies on November 2nd and is buried at La Trinité. Oh, she got buried at the abbey she built. That's a beautiful poetic end to her story. William commissions an exquisite monument, wonderfully worked with gold and precious stones, to be erected over her tomb. That's so sad. But wow, that 1077 fact, I don't think we read that at all in the article, that her son led a rebellion against William, and she's like, yeah, go for it, boy, I'm proud of you. And then did all that. That's hilarious here. Wow. What a story, what a life. They really did love each other, it looked like, Matilda and William. And then they both counteracted and balanced each other out really, really, really well. And they won over the hearts of England. That's quite remarkable for, the whole history between the English and French, to have that almost be a peaceful time between the two with their power and their rule was great. But there's an additional little section here that I want to quickly read out. It's titled interestingly, so I want to see what it means and why they added this part to the article. So I'll check it out here. It's titled, Matilda, How Much Do We Know? Although the lives of medieval women are typically obscure, there is a surprisingly rich collection of sources for Matilda's career as Duchess of Normandy and Queen of England. Principal among them are the Chronicles. The 11th and early 12th centuries were a time of intense activity among monastic historians, and their accounts vividly, and often salaciously, bring to life the characters and events of Matilda's story. These are supported by the charters to which she put her name, as well as her husband's ambitious survey of England, known as the Domesday Book, and the unique record of the Bayeux Tapestry, which was for many years believed to be the work of Matilda and her ladies. So there's actually a clear record here of her story and her accounts because of these monastic historians. Some people in this time period really believe that we have to capture what is happening in the region and in this part of the world. They really believe we need to write this down, capture it, celebrate it. And then there are charters, this Domesday Book, which is actually it's an interesting book, part of the history here in Domesday Book. And they have this tapestry as well that showed this story, her story, Matilda, directly. So they've had a pretty clear indication of this story from what was discovered in the books, the accounts from the historians, and this Domesday Book. So really, really cool here. But sadly, there are a few clues to Matilda's appearance and what she looked like. Although all of the chroniclers agree that she was very beautiful, any contemporary portraits or statues have long since been destroyed. A number of engravings claiming to be based upon a contemporary likeness appeared in the 19th century, in which Matilda bears a suspiciously close resemblance to Queen Victoria. The only reliable evidence we have derives from the discovery of her skeleton in 1961 at the Abbey of La Trinité. A study of her remains suggested that she was extremely small, for the skeleton measured just 4 foot 2 inches. Oh, she was so tiny. Which, if you put that in perspective of her reign, her power, her control, her charisma, and all that she's done between the two nations, basically, England and Normandy, that's remarkable. Us short people, I'm only 5'1", I can say I'm short. We usually aren't seen in an act of authority. Usually not. So I'm impressed. That won me over with her. But wow, so a lot was actually detailed about her life, even though it was over 1,000 years ago. A lot was actually detailed from her life, because of some unique movements in England at the time for these historians. The tapestry that they found that was most likely made by Matilda and her ladies, her friends, and then the Domesday Book that her and her husband basically wrote. Very cool. Very unique story here, and yeah, this is a unique history for sure. Because every time you think about women in power, during these time periods, like the medieval time period, moving to more modern age, Renaissance era, that kind of thing. It's usually men have the power. They're just there to make sure that they bore a son, to make sure that they have a family and there has to be a son to take over. That's usually their only role. But as you can see with this example, that wasn't always the case, and I think that's something to celebrate in these episodes and the stories that I discover and find for you all. Is this is remarkable, and I think I really enjoyed our story. Hope you guys did too. That is going to be the end of Matilda, William the Conqueror's queen. It was quite a journey, a lot of interesting facts and twists and turns, and I think she was a remarkable lady. Let me know what you think below, and I can't wait for the next unique history I have. There's a few topics I've seen circulating on the website recently that I think would be really, really fun to do for you all. So again, I really appreciate you all listening. Let me know your thoughts below, and until next time, we're going to close the chapter on Matilda, and we'll start a new chapter next week. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.